You ever see that Star Trek episode with the Coms and the Yangs? Remember these guys that looked like High Germans? They're wild men. And the Coms are
Yes, I remember
educated.
them.
Yeah, and then at the end, the wild man begins to speak. Somebody brings out an old flag or a Bible or something, and he says, "E Pleglii," and then he begins to say something. And Kirk, of course, Kirk knows what that is immediately. He said, "That's not right." And he goes up and grabs the flag and he says, "I pledge allegiance to the United States of America." Yeah. "And to the republic for which it stands, one nation." I don't think he gets to under God. Maybe he does. "One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." I don't know about you. Did you have to say that in school growing up, elementary school at least? You did?
Absolutely. Yes, I did.
I think I
Every,
did at one time too, but it stopped eventually.
Really?
And this, I went to school, started going to school in '85.
Mm-hmm.
By the '90s, I think it was pretty much done.
I know we did it. I went into the school system in 1975, and the pledge has always been said through my school years.
Yeah, me too. I started in '58, and not only that, but I think in about fourth grade we began to have religious education in the schools, which some parents could opt their kids out of it. And of course, we thought these kids leaving, they must be atheists or their parents must be Satanists or something because they have to leave during religious education. But I thought that was very valuable. Time I got to fifth grade, I think they quit that. But anyway, the pledge is what we're talking about today. And the question is under God appropriate? Now, what we know, before we get any opinions, is that the pledge itself did not originally have under God in it. That came along in 1954 through the efforts of President Eisenhower, who at that time was very sensitive to the communist threat. I think probably because maybe Eisenhower should have gone right ahead and gone east there in World War II and took care of Russia entirely. But there was a communist threat as well as McCarthyism at that time, where they were trying to find people in Congress that were communist oriented or part of the Communist Party. Of course, in Hollywood, blacklisting and all that was going on. Well, the addition of under God came through an author named Bellamy, added it, or suggested added it, and Ike said, yeah, that's a good idea, in order to make a distinction between us and the Soviet atheists. So since 1954, that's been in the Pledge of Allegiance. But today, I've got mixed feelings about it. I don't say pledges to a flag. I don't feel like I pledge any allegiance to the flag. And I pledge allegiance to the country, of course. I'll be faithful to this country as long as the country doesn't go in a direction that is contrary to the Torah, because I feel, probably as you do, that I'm a citizen of another kingdom, a higher kingdom that has to take priority over the earthly kingdom, because at this time, we are not living in a permanent home, according to Hebrews. On earth, there's no permanent home. So I think another problem I have is with just the word God. And I read some of the arguments for and against having that in the pledge. And one of the arguments for is that it's not speaking of any God in particular. In fact, one of the pro arguments was, well, you could substitute in your own mind for God You could substitute Jesus Christ, or you could substitute Muhammad, or you could substitute the Hindu God. Of course, there's no one God in Hindu. I mean, we could say one nation under gods, about 1 million of them, if you wanted to. So it's not going to offend anybody. The counter to that is, well, it is going to offend atheists because they don't believe in any God. So, I can't make up my mind to be a pro or con on this at all. Have you been thinking about it this week? A little bit? What did you think when you were a school child? It was just part of living, wasn't it? Back when I was a school child, we'd say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we had an exercise where we would go jumping underneath the desk, or later on in school, we would take a drill to go down to a bomb shelter because of the threat of
I remember that.
war at that time, which, what good would it do to get under your desk? If if a nuclear bomb had come down, is that going to do you any good to get under your desk? Or even in a bomb shelter? Well, maybe in a bomb shelter, I don't know. But, of course, that's long since passed. You remember those days that there were people very concerned about life after a nuclear holocaust, and there was a fad about building shelters in your backyard. A lot of people put a big, like a 10 by 10 concrete shelter in the backyard. You could crawl in, and they put supplies in it. Actually, the last 15, 20 years or maybe more, people have been doing that again ever since 9/11, ever since the, what went on there at the turn of the century? I can't even remember anymore.
Y2K.
Y2K. How many of you prepared some for Y2K?
Not me. I was at the club on Y2K.
In where?
I was in the club.
In a nightclub?
Yep, I sure was.
You weren't at the VFW, I suppose.
No.
Okay. Y2K, I prepared highly for that. And of course, it was a problem there, a conflict inside too, because if you're a member of the kingdom of Yahweh, then do you really have to go and prepare anything? Won't you just be saved from that? Or is the recommendation of Yahshua more true? Get to the mountains. Get to the mountains.
Yeah, I did what Norman did. I waited to see what would happen. Of course, I was 19 then, but still, the Y2K thing is it's one of those things that you're just talking about, Jack. With the same thing with militias, the same thing with any type of movement or end times deal. What should we do as believers, as somebody who is a part of the kingdom that is not of this world? And not necessarily that we'd be rescued, but we should be provided for if we believe really that that's in everything that Yahshua said and his father also said.
That's a good statement. I've given that some thought too, and I don't know if this is a word from Elohim or not, but what I got was, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. If you're in the way, if you're Torah-centric, if you're evangelizing, using your life's time to evangelize, can't quit that just because of a threat, or because Latter-day Prophets these days are telling us, well, like last week, the 2,300 years of hell coming up. I don't know. I couldn't quite get a hold of that 2,300 years of hell, or that this nation was set out to be cursed or messed up because of being disobedient to the Torah. Hey, the whole world is disobedient to the Torah. How's my audio here?
It's fine on this end.
It's fine.
Yeah,
It's
sounds
fine.
good here.
All right, Sandra's having some problems. Good to hear you, Sandra.
She's
Maybe we'll
gone now, yeah.
Okay, yeah, she must be having the problem there. So let's get back down to the pledge or anything else that we've talked a little about today, and let's just get some opinion, since you've been thinking about this all week and you've been burning to talk about it. What do you think? Then I got a special question for Norman.
You know, some of what you're talking about, it crossed over into my generation in the school system. As far as the, I don't know if you remember, but when we started school in Dade County, they would come on the loudspeaker and you would hear this song.
Is that Reveille? You sure you weren't in church camp?
No, this was at Amelia Earhart Elementary School in Miami-Dade County.
Cool.
This went on every day.
Through the speaker.
Yes, through the speaker. And then there was prayer. And then there was a moment of silence. Remember, at the time that I went into the school system, we still had troops in Vietnam. Okay?
Yeah.
So that moment of silence was there. And then we went on with the rest of the announcements, and then we went on with the rest of our day. Then we would have these drills that you talked about, where they talked about how to get under the desk and how to go to a certain location of the school where you are accounted for and stuff like that. So these things went on into the late 70s, okay? Into the late 70s. That's correct.
You had prayer in a public school to the late 70s?
Yes, we did.
In Miami?
In Miami, yes. As a matter of fact, remember, Miami is a largely Jewish area. So we learned about Hanukkah. We learned about a lot of the Jewish traditions in the public school system. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
My principal, Mrs. Reblom, was Jewish. So you got that type of stuff. You had Jewish teachers and stuff that were connected. So we've fallen a long way from that period, okay? And so these things went on when I was coming into the system, kindergarten. Well, I came through the Head Start program that was put in place by Lyndon Johnson. So I came through Head Start, kindergarten, and I was there until the 5th grade. And then I went into another school. It was called Biscayne Gardens Elementary. And the same practices went on there. Okay?
That's surprising.
So it was probably the late 80s or all through my years of high school that went on at St. Augustine High School as well. I don't know what they're doing now, but it went on through my time there.
What kind of influence did it have on you?
I thought,
was it good?
Personally, I think it had a very good influence because we always stood for the flag. We put our heads on our heart, and we could not conceive of there being, we always said one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Of course, we'd say we'd elbow each other and say that includes everybody except you black. We joked about that, but it was a real deal in Miami. Okay, but at the end of the day, we stood for the American flag and we honored the American flag. And so I don't know. I don't know where they're coming today with this stuff. I find it foreign that people will not stand for the American flag.
Really? So what do you think? You give us this history now.
I personally think that if my granddaddy, who fought in World War I, could stand for the American flag when he didn't have civil rights, if my daddy, who fought in World War II, who went to World War II without civil rights, but he stood for the American flag, my mother, who was a nurse during that time, could stand for the American flag, what is the matter with me? They went through a lot of stuff
You are a
and they stood.
traditionalist. You're a big traditionalist. And what? But you not think about the fact that you don't really use the term God in speaking of the deity anymore? You pledge allegiance to God?
No, I pledge allegiance to Yahweh. And that's what I do when it comes to the saying of the pledges of allegiance, when it says one nation under Yahweh, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Because that's what his word says.
That's just what you can do then with the pro argument I mentioned a minute ago. You just think of your own God and put that in there as the God.
I don't know about that.
I'm trying to get you to.
No, I personally say Yahweh, but here's what I've gotten an opportunity to travel to different countries as well. And when I went to England, I was raised in a very Pentecostal family in which we do not bow to anything other than they would say the Lord God, but no, we didn't. But we didn't bow. But when I went to England and I went to visit with the Queen, I had to learn to do things in tradition of England. I had to learn when to stand. I had to learn when to sit. I had to learn when to bow, when to stand up. I had to learn how to eat in the court, these types of things. So I believe that if you come to the United States of America, you have to learn to do things the way we do them here. If you were in China, you would do the same thing.
As a matter of respect, I guess you're
yes,
talking about.
Exactly. I don't believe in bowing to any monarch, but when I visited in England, when I visited in Italy, when I visited, I had to learn how to do that in respect to those monarchs.
Did you bow to the Queen? Everybody's telling us today that she's like the Antichrist's mother or something.
No, she's fine. She's a nice old lady. She's a sweet lady. Leave that lady alone.
All right.
Jeez.
Anybody else? What have you been thinking this week?
Well, I think that it's fine to do this because it is a tradition, and the founding fathers probably wouldn't have objected to it. I think that the establishment clause has been misconstrued somewhat. But personally, growing up, we did have to recite it. But my family had always told me you have to go along with it, but you don't pledge anything to anything except Yahweh. You don't pledge anything to a flag. That's a symbol. But because everyone else does it, you have to. And you can mouth it and don't actually say it. And that's what I did.
Not really like the Associated Bible students.
I don't know.
They're pretty much anti-establishment, aren't they?
Pretty much, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But how about in church? If you've been in church, I mean, one thing that really bothered me as a pastor in denominational church was they have an American flag and they have a Christian flag in there. And then maybe once, twice a year, you say the Pledge of Allegiance on, well, usually around July 4th weekend. I wonder what that American flag was doing in the church sanctuary. What happens here is the melding of nationalism with religion. That's dangerous, don't you think? Or am I all
it's
left field?
It can be dangerous. Obviously, you see that you can use religion. Let's say that the Germans had their own thing. Of course, they had the neo-paganism thing going on, but they would co-opt anything they needed to make their point and to make themselves more powerful. So that was obviously dangerous. You had a mix of all kinds of things going on over there. Anything that came to hand, they used.
That was a true mix of nationalism and religion, definitely.
Religion is often a tool that can be used to, manipulate people. It's sad, but it is. It's especially in ultra nationalist terms. You've got today in the United States, I'm on Twitter quite a bit, and I see the people, they pray for Trump. I'm not anti-Trump, but they pray for him, and they see him like something like a Darius, and
An
it's like
anointed one, you're saying?
the anointed one's like, folks, that Trump wasn't all that much of a Christian before he was elected, and he still might not be. That's not the point. But they're making it out to be like he's something that he probably never was.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the president of the United States. I respect him for that, but don't dress up what he was and what he is. I know, the people, presidents before, maybe, Eisenhower and other presidents, they were truly, they attended church regularly. Yeah. They did these things regularly. Of course, it was the different early 20th century, and these guys were born, the first president of the United States that was born in the 20th century was Kennedy, I believe. So, we have, they took religion more seriously. It was something more part of their life. It wasn't just a suit coat that you put on and took off.
Well, I don't know. Look, Kennedys, yes, they were devout on the outside, but they didn't act devout.
That's true. Well, you could even go to Eisenhower, even say, he had he had something going on, or when he was over in the UK, over in England. So you got all kinds of things. It's not so much that people are, well, I guess we read something yesterday. I think it was in one of the Chronicles or Second Kings. It said one of the kings wasn't as bad, or wasn't as bad as his fathers. So it means that there is a degree to which you can, there is a comparison. Obviously, to compare things, you have to say something is worse or something is better than. So to say that these older presidents probably were more or less devout, obviously knowing if you know anything about them, you'll find out otherwise. But
I think that Trump is more of a nominal Christian than anything. But like you said, Gov, I think that people need to remember that he is not the patron saint of the United States. He might be doing some good things, but he is what he is. Now, you were talking, Jack, about Kennedy. Now, Kennedy was a outward Catholic, but on the inside, that family was a disaster area.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
Morally, I mean, about you read some of the books I read, Man of the House, and books that talk about Kennedy's life. The White House was raucous at nighttime. They lived a different way in the daytime than at nighttime. That's when all the party girls came out and all these things went on. But the point is, you have to remember that these people are humans just like us. And just like sometimes some of us are devout, some of us are nominal, some of us are not it. That's the way they are. So that's the way I view Trump. But with regards to the flag and pledging allegiance to the flag, it's like, look, it's the flag. It's a symbol. Israel had symbols. The last Torah Parsha. I think it's this coming Torah Parsha. No, it's not. It was a Torah Parsha that was talking about the various flags and standards that each tribe had. So we know that flags were part of the kingdom in the wilderness, of the congregation in the wilderness. We know that flags were part of the United States of Israel when David unified everybody. And we know that each tribe has a flag or a standard. And you can go and you can find these things out by checking into them. You could know what color it was, what the symbol on the flag was. So symbolism is not strange to the Hebraic community. It's just that I think people have a problem when it comes to what they see as a secular state. You know, I'd be interested to hear, why do people feel we should not have a flag or pledge allegiance to that flag?
Okay, that gives me a good jumping on point here. Just this week, it just came to me. I don't know what the name of the players in football are anymore, but there were a couple of players back some years ago that during the national anthem, they wouldn't stand up. And
That's
during the
Colin
flag,
Kaepernick.
who was
Yes.
it, Kaepernick?
Yes.
Now, it is said that he is now attending, he's attending training camps and trying to get back in. But what do you know about his particular beef with the Pledge of Allegiance? I don't know what the story is there. I just read the story about this week about him coming back after they showed some pictures in there of him and some other guy sitting on the bench while everybody else was standing up. You know what that story is?
Yes, I do. I think a lot of his issues had to do with the Black Lives Matters organization and what they were doing. They were using public people like Colin Kaepernick and others, sort of like they did with Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese and guys when they used their positions as athletes to advocate for social justice issues. And so this is what they're trying to revive again, getting athletes and entertainers to lobby against the Trump agenda. I had one, I don't know if you heard, the Tribe Called Quest, where the guy was up there, and to be honest, me and Governor was watching it, and it truly sounded demonic. And this is what he sounded like, and I'm going to do the best I can with it. He said, resist, resist, resist. We come against the powers of Agent Orange and their gesticulations. I'm like, what is he saying? I'm sitting over there in the big chair, the governor's sitting over here, and we're watching this foolishness, and we could not understand what he was saying. So this is what the BLM movement was doing, in which they would go into a rally of a public official and they would seize the podium and they would put their message out that way. Now, there were some conservative Republicans that stood their ground, and they met them head on, and they did not get the chance to seize the podium like they did with certain politicians. But that was a whole movement during that time, 2016, to come against Donald Trump and the conservative agenda. So that's what Colin Kaepernick, as a result of that, not only did Kaepernick lose his job with the San Francisco 49ers, but he was kind of blacklisted from the NFL. So now he's trying to get into the NFL after 3 years, back into the NFL after 3 years. So they're having these private workout sessions to see if a team will pick him up.
I see. Okay. Well, you said Pee Wee Reese. That you're talking about the golfer?
No, Pee Wee Reese was a Dodgers shortstop. Yes, Pee Wee Reese.
Who's the Pee Wee that played golf in the 60s?
I don't know.
I can't think of it. Yeah. Now I know what you mean. What kind of advocating was he doing?
Okay, he was as a Dodger shortstop, he was one of the guys that was on the Dodgers. It was the New York Dodgers at that time, the Brooklyn Dodgers.
Brooklyn.
And when Jackie came from the minor league to Brooklyn, he was one of the people that had to basically give Jackie Robinson's thumbs up or thumbs down. Because there was a petition that was signed by a lot of Southern baseball players at that time, and particularly a lot of them that fought in World War II. And if he said no, then the petition died. And he said no, and the petition died. So him and Jackie Robinson became friends lifelong friends. And so he was an advocate for social justice causes. He was an advocate for blacks being in baseball, along with Branch Rickey and other baseball players, Ralph Ranker, the people that was on that team. So they became advocates of African Americans being able to play big league ball. So until 1947, there was no blacks in big league ball. They had the Negro League, but that was it.
Yeah, I got to see Satchel Paige play one time. That's off the subject, but that was cool. How about somebody else? Now you've got this traditionalist that is all for the mixing of nationalism with his religion. Am I the only one that sees a problem with that in here?
No, I think there's a problem with it, because if it originally did not include it, the only reason they put it in was to be for political interests. You know, like you said in the beginning, they were trying to weed out the commies and, you know, the godless communists. And I think using the word or invoking the deity like that is false pretenses, sort of. And also, do you want people who don't follow the Father to use the term that they're under the Father? Because that's not true, and it's reflecting badly on people who do follow the Father. You know, in a way, you get these guys out here who just mouth the words and go along with it, and then they go out and do heinous acts and violence and crime and stuff. I mean, what kind of witness is that, you know, of us?
One nation under God. I see some inconsistencies, definitely. Of course, the first thing that comes to my mind is the national policy of abortion and the United States supporting abortion and in some cases supporting terrorism around. I'm not against the United States. I love this country. I've been, like you, I've been other places. I've been some bad places, including communist countries. I would take this anytime. I feel like the opportunity for freedoms are quickly going away. And instead of moving toward Elohim, it seems that we're moving away from Elohim, and that includes the church. Somebody else? Anybody? By the way, under God came in through the Knights of Columbus. The Knights of Columbus began a great campaign to change the Pledge of Allegiance and get that in there. And I'm thinking, well, Knights of Columbus is like the Masons for Catholics, right?
I don't really know too much about them, but I know that it's a Catholic group.
Yeah, the Knights of Columbus is an alternative to becoming a Mason, because the Masons, they don't include Catholics, I do not think. They think Catholicism is wrong for the wrong reasons, probably. So the Knights of Columbus were formed in order to give these men their own kind of Masonic unit within the Catholic Church. Let me give
the same could be said of B'nai B'rach then.
Of what?
B'nai B'rach.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
How about Demolay? Isn't that like Eastern Star or something like that?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I found out something about the Eastern Star. I happened to be I'm reading these books, and I found out why so many African Americans belong to the Eastern Star.
Why?
Because during the time of segregation, when something happened, let's say Oh, you stepped out of line and you got popped. Bang. Your family needed to be taken care of and your burial expenses needed to be paid. So they joined that as a security against reprisals from segregations, the White Citizens Council, things of that nature. I was shocked. I probably have some of them in my own family.
African Americans were allowed in Eastern Star. Did they have segregated clubs?
They probably did. They probably did.
I know in the Masonic Order, still down here in the South, in some towns there are two. One's a lodge for white people, and the other is a lodge for everybody else.
I would not be surprised if they do, but I know that some of the groups are integrated groups, but they had people that would fund these groups, and that's how a lot of families got taken care of during those times.
So, like, if a person was lynched, Eastern Star would take care of their family, or exactly what kind of demise did the person have to have?
It didn't matter. If they got hurt on the job, if they got something happened that they got lynched, they would take care of those families, make sure that they had food, make sure that their bills were paid, that they took care of funeral expenses, they took care of all of that stuff. And even a lot of blacks are Masons, okay, for the same reason, for the exact same reason. That's where you started, I think, after 1911, you start getting the Omega Psi Phis of the world. You got the Alpha Phi Alpha, the Alpha AK Psi. These groups, this is what they did for people in the community because it was necessary.
What do you know about the I felt the thighs?
Not a thing.
Okay. This is one quote concerning this debate. The debate revolves around a number of questions. Mainly, the debate regards whether it's consistent with the separation of church and state or the Establishment Clause in the United States Constitution. Does it establish or favor a particular form of religious belief? Does it give favor to believers over non-believers? Should we allow for leniency? Is the phrase consistent with the use of religious wording by the founding fathers in certain founding documents, such as the Declaration of Independence? I think so. Is it legitimate to consider our rights as endowed by a creator and include this interpretation in everything that follows in the U.S. Constitution? And things like the Pledge of Allegiance. Is the pledge more of a cultural or historic expression than a religious expression, etc., etc., etc.? Even the debate, we have the concept of God being not really a religious concept at all, but more of a secular kind of nationalistic God. I'm talking about the God that is invoked during what do you call those things? Like, well, we'll say Knights of Columbus, Knights of Columbus meetings, Masons meetings, at the beginning of women's luncheons here and there, at the beginning of Congress, all these different groups that are getting together and praying at the beginning. This is, I think of this as a different God. Like the old grandfather with the long beard that we have to throw a little cookie to at the beginning of the meeting and then forget about it. The cookie being a prayer, an acknowledgement that there is a God at the beginning of a meeting. I can see that really went over.
Well, no, I can see that. I agree with that because, and you don't know what sort of deity that these people are trying to invoke or what they actually follow. You know, their idea of what they follow may be different than most people's or anybody else's, actually. You know, they may be saying, please let me get my way in this meeting or my way with this deal. And, you know, who is that? Who are you trying to invoke and call to your assistance for something like that? You know, I think that it's showing a lack of, it's trivializing the creator, you know, in a way. And
Oh, that's good.
you know, I mean,
That's good.
you're
Trivializing.
you're calling him down to take care of this, you know, this meeting of the women's group. Hey, we want a little help here. And it's over. Well, should they, you know, tear this park down to put up a store or something? You know, what is that should be not, that's not really, to me, appropriate to invoke the deity over. I mean, you could ask for guidance, maybe, I guess, but to say, hey, don't let him do this, that's just bringing him down to the mundane world, and he's so far beyond and outside of that.
Yeah, it's like throwing a chicken to an alligator.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Well,
as far as
go ahead, Bill.
as far as the pledge is concerned, you know, since the phrase was added, then I guess, you know, there was a time when it was done without it. And also in the documents, it mentions that we have inalienable rights, and or in the Declaration of Independence. And Thomas Jefferson, of all people, put that there. It's not something that, or it is something that's kind of integral. Now, how you conceive of the creator or God is obviously left up to debate, and Jefferson didn't really care about that. But he did say that we have an inalienable right we are endowed with inalienable rights from our creator. You know, obviously he was a deist, I believe.
What he said was, Jefferson, concerning his religion, he
Mhm.
said, I'm not a Christian, but I'm more Christian than any Christian that I know.
Yeah, I have a quote here that says from this is from Patrick Henry, who says the great pillars of all government and of social life are virtue, morality, and religion. This is the armor, my friend, and this alone that renders us invincible. Well, again, religion is basically, it's believing in a higher power, but it's also how you live that out. And I think virtue and morality come from it, but I don't think that, you know, that's the person you are. And that's what you were saying, Governor, is that Thomas Jefferson was an honorable person. And even if he was a deist or didn't believe like in the Christianity of the time, he was an honorable and righteous person. And I understand how he wants to put separation between church and state, because in the past the church was an official government arm and did a lot of injustice to people. Mm-hmm. So they were kind of standing against the unrighteousness of using it in that form, even though, and they were saying that everyone needed to walk out righteousness and good behavior and morality. They weren't saying you didn't, but he didn't want to put anything official in the government's hands to enforce it.
Yeah, in fact, really quick, I went into Patrick Henry here because I was thinking that he was against establishing religion. And what it says here is that he was uncomfortable with the role of the Anglican Church as the established religion in Virginia and fought for religious liberty throughout his career. So maybe he was just against the Anglicans because, of course, that was the religion of the English, the state religion that held the colonies in their sway. We would have been against that too.
Yeah, I can understand how that would be wrong. Now we have an example of a church, I guess, being the government in the Byzantine Empire, which goes back a very long time. And they died, that empire, you know, ceased to exist long before this country was created or even thought of. Almost, oh, wow, 300 years, 320 something years. So, but they were governed by the emperor, who I guess was the head of the church too, I think. And they were around for almost 1,000 years.
Yes.
They did it fairly successfully.
Yes.
You know, obviously, but then I guess in anything human, there is contradiction. There's always going to be something where you wonder, wow, well, they're not living out what that verse in scripture says there. I mean, we do it, you know, everybody here has probably done it once or twice or 100 or 200 times or more. Governments do it. Now, I guess it's easier if you just if you try to keep things nebulous, but that's not always best either. You know, because like you said earlier, God is a catch-all. You know, while or it can be now, because I guess that originally it was probably meant to be more the Christian God, but what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because each Christian, depending on denomination, have a different view slightly
Oh
of what
yeah.
that is.
Oh yeah.
The Catholics, the Protestants, and then you've got the different denominations within the Protestant umbrella or under that umbrella, you know, as to how they see God, how they see the deity. You know, then you got Trinitarians, non-Trinitarians, and on and on and on.
We see
So
even in our little movement a lot of diversity in individual beliefs, and people are so bound to their traditional beliefs, whatever they happen to be, that they can't even fellowship together. If you're not on the right calendar, if you don't say the name of your God correctly, just issues that really have little to do with whether they're devout or not.
yeah, this is true, but I think that some people mistake devotion for those things. So you get the name, you have to say the name Yahuwah, Yahweh, Yehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, or Yahawashi for Yahshua, or Yehoshua, or Yeshua, or Yahusha, or whatever it is you want. You know, that's somehow it's kind of mistaken for devotion or for being devout. But since there are so many ways to say it, you know, these are just words. They're not actions. Devotion is your actions.
Well, it's like in the same vein, working in the Baptist church for a while, the pastor said quite often that no, God never hears the prayers of a Jew or anybody else that hasn't made the Jesus walk. And that seems to be the belief of the largest denomination of Christians in the United States and probably the world. It's very divisive that God doesn't hear a prayer of the Jews.
Well, there are people who cite in our group or in our movement, is it one of the somewhere in Proverbs that, you know, if you turn your ear from Torah or turn away from Torah, your prayer is an abomination. So but then you have Christians whose prayers are answered, whether they say the pledge or not, and however they mean and however they conceive of the deity. You have Jews that are obviously blessed. I mean, you look in material, at least in the material sense, they are blessed. There
Are
are a
they
lot of them that
blessed, or
are.
do they or do they just work to get what they've got? And you know, in some cases, like we talked about the Kennedys, they got all their money through bootlegging.
Right.
Right.
They still get money from the sale of booze.
Well, you know what he says in the Torah. You know, we forget this at times that they worked hard to get what they got, but the truth of the matter is, it is He who blesses people with the ability to get wealth. So it still comes back to Him. I don't care whether you're a gangster in the street. You know, Yahweh still the giftings and callings are given without repentance. So if Al Capone knew how to be a good businessman, that it is what it is. He's going to be judged by what he did with his gifting. But look, it is what it is.
You're saying that what's important in the kingdom is redeeming that wealth.
That's
it. Okay.
That's it.
That makes a lot more sense. I mean, if you're not redeeming that, bringing it from the kingdom or the dominion of darkness into the kingdom of the Son, so Colossians says, then you're really only doing it for your own reasons. And probably Yahweh is not going to accept uh, filthy lucre that you got through bad dealings or unsound business practices or cheating other people.
And if you notice that people who do that and they may get money, the money always just goes right through their hands. Always does, because Yahweh's not going to accept that.
Mm-hmm. I have a little something here for you. Let's see if I can find what I did with it just now. Here it is. Generally, we have some pretty simple points that are either yes for it under God or no against it. Here's the simple yes points that have come from different people surveyed on the subject. Leave it because it's not a prayer. It was not written to offend. Its purpose is not for worship. Leave it for protection. Leave it even for people with no God, because perhaps they'll get blessed anyway. Taking the phrase out will cause conflict. Leave it. This is not a secular government. Leave it. It's just a vague reference to some God. It's for the sake of freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. The phrase is not offensive. The word God is symbolic to the faith of a nation. And leave it because for the sake of unity. The no points, just as simple. Only put in under God in 54 because of the war against, famously, atheist communists. Take it out because God has nothing to do with patriotism. Take it out because the phrase under God should not be included in a pledge that has already been written. Under God is not uniting people, it's separating people. Question is, who's really saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Take it out. Because it violates Constitution. How does being under God express patriotism if the pledge is for the sake of being united in a patriotic front? The current pledge may not apply to everybody. Take it out. Under God proclaims Christianity, which everybody's not a Christian. And finally, for the sake of the separation of church and state, I should have said almost finally, because the last one is God doesn't exist anyway. Why put that in? Okay, I threw that in to take up some time. Let's hear from somebody we haven't heard from yet. Norman, are you still there? I'm wondering if they have a pledge to the Canadian flag, to the maple leaf.
Yes, I'm still here.
Is there something like that in Canada or South Africa,
yes.
for that matter?
South Africa, not that I recall. But yes, here in Canada, it's very much so as well, an allegiance to the flag. But I've never, as long as I can remember, since I became a Christian, a follower of Yeshua, and the understanding that there's a creator, I've never held an allegiance to the flag, other than what was said earlier, an allegiance to the creator of heaven and earth and everything therein. And that has always been my belief without understanding why. So yeah, that's my story.
If you're in a place, in a particular place where you have to say a pledge, do you get up and say it, Norman?
Yes, I do. You know, I'm not going to offend anybody. I'm not going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. You know, why would I do that? The same as many years ago when I was back in South Africa, Mom was getting on in life, and she wanted me to attend a Christmas party. I said, Mom, you know that I don't celebrate Christmas. And I said, okay, I tell you what, because I have respect for my parents, I will attend under the condition that I do not participate in any of the festivities as such. I'll be there, and that's. But when you all stand up and say Merry Christmas and exchange gifts, no, I won't exchange gifts, and I won't do that. But I'll be there. So yes, there's a point where it's yes, I'll do it. No, I won't do it.
Well, we had something of a dispute not long ago over that very subject. Should we or should we not even participate in such things? Did you say you were 10 years old at that time?
No. 10 years, no, I didn't say
10 years ago.
No, a lot longer than 10 years ago. It was
Okay.
about 20 years ago when I
I
was
thought-
back.
I thought you said 10 years ago. That would have been before, you were 10 years old. That would be before Under God was even in a pledge. I mean, that was back like in the 19th century.
No, I was a young man. I think I was in my early 20s. I think most young people are curious, and don't forget, this is going back in a different era, in the 50s and 60s. And people were curious. Is there a creator? Is there not? Who is it? Where is he? And as a young man, I was searching. And through various means, I came to accept that yes, there was. And the typical law of prayer and all that. But over time, one learns and grows and figures things out.
Okay. Did you have religious education in your schools? Did you go to public schools?
As I mentioned before, I had to go to special schools due to the fact that I missed a lot of schooling as a child due to the accident that I had. So no, there was not that. I don't recall that. But I think in South Africa at that time, there probably was. I think that was part of the British system, I believe.
Do you mind if I ask you what church that Mother had you attend?
Oh, right from the beginning, we attended the Anglican Church.
Anglican.
Yeah. And I followed that through most of my young life. And then after various searching the scripture, when the minister had said this, and a couple of us would, after church service, would go and study what was said and said, well, that's where does he get that from? And I eventually mentioned, as I've mentioned before, I ended up in the Church of the Nazarene, a Wesleyan church. Now I loved that. I thought that was it. But as I progressed, I learned more and learned about the Sabbath, and obviously who keeps the Sabbath? Well, the Seventh-day Adventist, and so that's part of my journey here.
I think if I was going to go back in church, I will go back into the Anglican Church. We got new ones springing up that are conservative all over the place, new types of Episcopal churches and so forth.
Yes.
But the Nazarene Church is very close. Of course, it's an offshoot of the Methodist Church, which is an offshoot of the Anglican Church.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Your bandwidth is low.
Yeah, it says so. Yeah, I'm seeing that now as well.
Let's take a vote. Let's end up with a vote. All who feel compelled to stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with your hand on your heart, say aye.
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 All opposed? Aye.
Aye.
There's two of us. We ended up on the wrong side again, didn't we, Allison?
Usually
Okay.
I do.
Thank you all for being a part today. And let's see, next week, I'll just tell you right now, I want you to come up with some predictions for 2020. Predict what's going to happen in current events, in politics, in religion, in natural happenings, in creation. Let's see what we come up with, and we'll save this program. Now, we've been doing this for a long time. So, next year we'll be doing this, and we can look back and see if any of our predictions came true. Let's be serious about it. And just don't forget it. Leave it on your mind and let it stew for the week until we get together again next Shabbat. What do you say? And again,
That's
thank you
cool.
for your input. I mean, very good. Very good. See you next time. Maybe tomorrow night.